In the previous video, we added the create user and the manage users pages, but we left out a field on the create user form. So that's the field we're going to be adding in this video. And I am referring to the profile input or the profile image input field. Now this field uses an image to indicate to the user that they are going to be displaying their user image here. This image, I have gone ahead and downloaded it and saved it in under assets, images, avatar folder. So the image is just avatar.jpg, and you can get an image like this simply by searching for avatar png and then browsing around for any image that looks like a very good placeholder image on your form, and then downloading it into your avatar folder. Okay, so having downloaded that, the next step is to add the HTML for the profile image field. So we will open create.html inside the users folder and scroll to the top of the form just before the username input field. Okay, so here we're going to create a div with a class of input group, just like all the other input fields, but this one is going to have a few extra classes. One of them is going to be avatar input group, and the other one is going to simply be center. And we are adding the center class so that we can centralize all the information on the profile image input field. As you can see, it is horizontally centralized. Okay, so that is text align center that achieves that. Now within this input group, we are going to create a file input, a hidden file input. The name is going to be avatar, the ID is going to be avatar input, and we will also give it a class of avatar input because we will select it in our JavaScript to trigger a click event. So this input field does the same thing as the featured image input field we created a few videos ago. So basically we will need a file input to be able to view our browser directory, or rather our computer directory. So we will hide this input. Let's give it a class of hide so that it doesn't display. And then when the user clicks on this image or this button, we will programmatically trigger a click event on this input field, and then our computer directory will appear for the user to select their image. So that's it for the hide input. The next thing we are creating is the button, and the button here is the entire image itself. So this is basically a button with a background image on it. Okay, so this button, let's be sure to give it a type of button, otherwise the form is going to assume that it is the submit button, and when the user clicks on it, it will automatically submit the form even though that was not the user's intention. Okay, we'll give it a class of avatar of change avatar btn, and then the label on this image, as we can see on the finished project, is simply change. But we are going to place this change inside a span so that we can select it and give it the styles like this almost black background color, and make it appear only when we hover on the button. Okay, so that's why we are wrapping it around the span. Okay, so that is it for the button. Lastly, we need to create a label. So I'm just going to add a label element, and it's going to read profile image optional, and this label element will be connected to the avatar input. So we'll set the for attribute to avatar input so that when the user clicks on the label, this input field will be triggered as well, and it will bring up the computer directory. Okay, so that is all about the HTML for this input field. If we refresh it, there's nothing big that happens, only that we have our button as well as the label centralized on the form. Okay, so let us move on to the next step, which is styling this in our CSS and then adding the image or the image placeholder as the background. So I will expand our assets folder and open admin_style.css inside the CSS folder. I am going to select this button, the change avatar btn. It is inside the avatar input group. So let us select that. In the CSS file, I will search for where we define the styles for admin form. Okay. And then I will scroll to the bottom of this section and add a new selector. So we will select the avatar input group and then the change avatar btn inside it. Okay, so this button is the entire image. So we'll give it a height of 150 pixels, a width of 150 pixels, a transparent border. So we set border to 1 pixel, solid transparent. We give it a border radius of 50%, and that is what gives it the completely round structure. We give it a margin bottom of 8 pixels. We set the outline to none, so we don't want any outline on the button. And then we'll set our background image. So we use the URL function in CSS to specify the path to the image. And since we are inside the CSS folder, we need to step out of the folder before stepping into the images folder and pointing to the image. So we step out of the CSS folder with double full stop and then a /. Then we can now enter images, avatar folder, and then we point to the image. Okay, so we set the background size to our cover, and then we do overflow hidden and cursor pointer so that the user knows they can click. Alright, lastly, we'll set the position to relative, and we are setting the position to relative because we have a child element of this button that we want to display in relation to this button. So I am referring to this span element that you see when you hover. So it is found at the bottom of the button. So we are setting the button position to relative, and then we can set the span element to position to absolute, and then surface it when the user hovers like this. Now, as you can see, by default the span doesn't show, and it only reveals when you hover on the button. So let us hide the span by default. So I'll select the span, which is within the change avatar button, and I'll give it an opacity of 0, which means that it is not going to be displaying by default. First of all, let us see what this looks like. Refresh. Okay, so this is just the button with a background image on it. So now let us provide the hover effect that makes the label on the button to appear. Okay, so for that we are going to select the span again, but this time we will select the span only when the user has hovered on the change avatar button. So these are the styles that should take effect when the user has hovered on the change avatar button. So we want the span to first of all, let's give it opacity of 1 so that it becomes visible again. We set the position to absolute because we want to display it relative to the parent element, which is a change avatar button. We want it to be at the bottom of the button, so we set bottom to 0. We set left to 0 and right to 0 because we want it to span the entire width from left to right. Now, since we gave our button an overflow of hidden, you cannot see the change text beyond the button. So that was why it was important for us to give overflow of hidden. Okay, we'll give it a padding of 8 pixels, a color of white, a font size of 1 rem, and lastly we'll give it a background color of black. Now this is not going to be pure black. We're going to make it slightly transparent. So let us set the opacity to 0.25. Okay, so if we refresh and we hover, the label now appears, but it is appearing very rapidly, like instantly. So we want this to have a little a slow effect where it appears a bit more slowly. So we're going to add the transition prop, or the transition property, and we are going to be transitioning only the opacity. We want only the opacity to slowly change, and we want it to change over a time period of 0.125 seconds, and then the easing function will be easing out. So back to our browser, we refresh, and it slowly appears. Alright, so that's it. We have added the profile image field on our create user form. See you in the next video.